about how to do databases, right? That was it. What we said we were going to try. Let me mention there are many database things in Java. A long time ago, they came out with JDBC. You may have heard of ODBC, which was Microsoft technology. Microsoft C# stole stuff from Java, and so it's actually a much nicer language now, because basically, well, they could start and copy Java 10 years after Java. Here was kind of the reverse. ODBC is a horrible piece of software. And JDBC is much nicer, also because ODBC was in C, which lends itself to an uglier interface. And so JDBC is fairly nice. It allows us to do SQL calls. Now, what is a database? Collection of data, right? What's the standard database technology that we are going to use? Oh, what's relational databases, right? What's a relation?
Table has a key. It's like a hash table.
It's, yes.
Table with a key. That is in first come form.
It's an Excel spreadsheet. If I asked you to, actually, I'm not going to use I'm not going to use numbers because I hate it. But I can do an Excel spreadsheet now, a Google Docs spreadsheet. If I asked you to create a list of people who are in this class, right? What would you do? You'd come up with a table, right? You'd probably write it as an Excel spreadsheet, right? You would say, oh, this is first name. Or if I ask you to print, right? We were using our phone book, right? So an entry has a first name, last name, and a bunch of phone numbers. So we would do first name and last name, right? And we would be able to write stuff like this, right? Now, what do I do with a bunch of phone numbers for a list? I could do this. Right? This sucks. Why? Because I can only have 3, right? And they are the same, but not. It's like it's actually horribler, but about as horrible as instead of defining an array using variables called phone 1, phone 2, phone 3, instead of using something like an array or something like that, right? Who here has taken databases or is taking it?
I haven't taken them, but I've had.
And who here has never seen that stuff? Have you seen SQL before? Yeah. Yeah. Then this is, right? So what you would do is somehow create an ID for this guy, right? And then have a different table where you would have person ID, phone number, right? And phone type. And so if Orlando Bloom is number 1, then here you say person 1, 111, 11, 1111, phone type cell, and person 1 has another number. Stuff like that, right? Cool. Now, you need something to store your data in an actual database. So you need some sort of database management system, right? That will actually implement all that stuff. Makes your life so much easier because now you don't have to do much stuff. You don't have to do all of that reading from files and things like that, right? In many times in real life, you use a server DVMS. You use PostgreSQL or PostgreSQL, or if you need to, then you use something else, right? Oracle is a really good database server. It is actually you can get demo or non. You can get fairly decent versions of all of the commercial databases. I tend to prefer to use open source stuff. So to me, PostgreSQL is the obvious choice 99% of the time if I'm doing my own stuff. There's MySQL, which I haven't used lately. It used to be a piece of manure. I don't know whether it has stopped being a piece of manure or not. There is Oracle, which is really good, but it used to be expensive for when you get to use it a lot. There is IBM's DB2, and there is Microsoft SQL Server, which is actually a really nice database. It used to not be my choice in any case because it only ran on Windows, and that's no. There's no way that I'm going to use Windows on my servers unless I'm working for Microsoft, and then I was happily running. It is actually a fairly nice DB as long as you're doing Windows. Nowadays, they have a version that runs on Linux. So I need to... SQL Server, Microsoft SQL Server. They have a Linux version now. So I need to go and play with it again. I was very happily surprised both by how computers have advanced and how good it was. I work for Microsoft, so I revised my expectations by an order of magnitude. My idea was that Excel, I revised it by like 2 orders of magnitude. You'd use Excel for something in the hundreds of rows, maybe thousands, and then stop, right? And then you would use relational databases for stuff in the millions of rows. And then after that, you can, but you need a DBA, right? At Microsoft, we're doing Excel spreadsheets. There's people there who use Excel for with millions of rows with no problem. And we were doing SQL Server databases with hundreds of millions of rows with no DBA. I installed Manure on my machine, and we used it for prodish stuff for months until we needed to productionize it. So it is fairly nice, right? As you know, eventually databases, relational databases don't scale. So if and when you go beyond the millions of rows or the hundreds of millions of rows, then you start doing NoSQL, right? It is uber nice that people have figured that stuff out. So you can use Dynamo, which is the AWS thing, or all of the other guys have different stuff. I've only used Dynamo in Angular because now I use AWS, surprisingly. So it is amazingly cool that they do all of that stuff for you. They also have all of them. Amazon has RDS, AWS has RDS, where they will keep the database server for you so you don't have to think about it. However, I'm going to do the simplest possible thing. What is the simplest possible database? Sorry? Excel. No, an actual database-ish. DBMS, sorry, not database. What's the simplest possible DBMS?
Access.
No, simpler. What runs on your phone?
Oh,
Yeah, we are going to use SQLite.
SQLite, yeah.
Why? Because it's the simplest possible thing.
Free.
It's not supposed, yeah, it's free. Yeah, most of them are supposed to be client server, so you actually have a server and you're sending SQL commands over the network. We are going to use SQLite because, well, that's so. At some point in time, I installed the command. So I have SQLite 3. cd. Where is this stuff? Project cs5kNov13 examples. I'm gonna do SQLite 3 test1.db with some log when I do create table contact first name, or let's do id int I can do, let me do this first and then let me start learning SQL again. Yay! It sort of works, right? And we told it to store it here. Control D. So there is a file called test1 database, and it has 8K, right? So SQLite has that stuff. Now I'm going to try to see if I can open it with Java. To my build.gradle, I have to add more dependencies, just like we added Jackson for the previous one. This hopefully is SQL. This will add it to IDEA. And we can go learn. I tend to use Spring JPA at work for most of our database stuff. And if I do this kind of simple database stuff, I use Groovy rather than Java. It is downloading stuff. Seems to be okay. So we can probably build, so I'm not gonna do that. So let's, yes, of course, I want you to do it. Let me start from this, and we'll then add it to the actual phone book or something like that. How do we do JDBC? Let's go over this stuff.
The JDBC is just a connection between Java and whatever
is Java database connectivity or something like that. Is it kind of um, the most basic connection, but it's a generic connection, so you don't need to do it. You don't need to do something different for Oracle or Microsoft SQL Server or.
It's basic but good.
It is God basic but horrible,
But horrible.
but it's basic. So what everybody does, right, is build on top of that. So our thing was called test.db. So let's see if this would probably not come, but actually doing something else, but it might even work. There is one more piece of it actually works. Okay. the main thing, well, there are two main things that we're going to use. A connection, and that allows us to execute both statements and queries, and a result set, which is what comes out of a query. So, JDBC things look like URLs, and they will be different depending on which server you are connecting and things like that. In this case, right, I'm actually, and the driver manager is one of the newer things that does magic. Before, you used to try to do this kind of stuff and you would get a problem because it wouldn't load the drivers, but in this case it loads it by magic. So I'm telling it, it's a JDBC connection, my database is SQLite, and then other stuff goes there.
So you didn't give the full pass to the file.
No, because it's being run in this folder, right?
Oh, it's the same folder.
I'm putting it on the main folder of the project. But you could give the full path. And if you were doing Oracle or SQL Server or PostgreSQL, then you would put the server name and username and password and all of that stuff. I'm skipping all of that stuff. Isn't that cool? From the connection, I can get a statement. Which is kind of a horrible name, but I'm saying the timeout is 30 seconds. So after 30 seconds, if you haven't got an answer, give up. Right? It's never gonna come. JDBC, I think, requires execute update versus execute query. So if you're gonna change the database, you need to do execute update as opposed to execute query. This is, and SQL tends to look like SQL, but there may be variations. So this is for SQLite. This is dropping a table person, creating a table, inserting into them, and then executing select star from person. We are gonna delete this stuff because we created that thing that wasn't person, right? Our one was called what? Contact, right? And then I call execute query. This gives me a result set. A result set is kind of a really ugly list of um, really ugly dictionaries. So what I'm doing is I'm gonna have
Is result set a normal collection from a,
no, it is not.
it's from one of the database libraries or from one of the
It's from it is Java SQL result set. So it's not a collection because that would make it useful. And the stuff inside is not a map. So instead of using get, I have to specify what am I getting. So get int will read as an int because I need to know which kinds of stuff it is. So so let's change it.
it'll print out all of the first names and all of them.
Well, it will go through every row and print, right? The ID, the first name, and the last name. Maybe. If we did it right. Or crash.
There's test and test one.
Oh.
We did
Oh. Oh, it was test 1, not test. So this guy should be test1.db. Maybe. Yeah. Isn't this cool?
Oh, it's in a while loop.
It's in a while loop, yeah. And this is an iterator, but a result set is not a collection. So you can't just do for each. It's the same idea. It's almost the same thing, but it's not the same thing because yes. Now what you
Well, it's easy to get all the values and turn them into Java, whatever you want.
It's-
or vice versa.
yeah, it is easy but painful to do that, right?
I mean, it just takes a lot of specific commands, like
Yes.
get all of these guys and get all of these guys.
Yes.
There could be lots and lots of columns, and you only want some of them, but not all of them.
Which is why, well, you get to decide what you're doing. Many times this is what you want, so you use a tiny library like JDBI, something that just makes it not that ugly.
Well, you could use SQL commands to get whatever you want, and then
Well, but then you still need to map it to your actual classes in Java. The other thing you can do is use a relatively simple ORM, object relational mapper, like Spring JPA, or actually JPA is one of the J2EE standards for that stuff, that allows you to say, here's my class, and this field maps to this column, and this other field maps to this column, and the table that this maps to is this other table. And then that just reads it magically from there. You can do convoluted object relational mappers, and at some point in time, you get horrible performance because you don't understand what SQL is being generated anymore. And so there is a trade-off there. It makes your code so much nicer. I seldom do these things, but you are losing. It's easy to lose sight of what's going on and then generate horrible SQL. That will take forever. The other hand, look at how simple it is to open a database and do stuff on it. What do we want to do with it? Do we want to... Our phone book has a save and a load. Should we try to implement save from DB and load from DB? Or do we know enough about databases that we don't want to do? Is that going to be grunt work, or is that going to be useful? Or both?
I don't think doing it because everything I'm looking at is very, very good to look at.
And again, normally you may not want to do that.
I know, but if I try to like think, oh, okay, well then what's the good way to do it? Like, let's do it this way first, and then
Shall we
can talk about all the like 80 different other.
How about the graphic interface?
Do we want to play a little bit with something like Swing?
Yeah, using graphic interface to insert to database or get it from the database.
Maybe.
Not too much.
We're definitely not going to finish, but I'm actually planning to leave you, because I'm not here next week. So I'm actually planning to leave you stuff about GUIs for you to watch if you want next
Everybody's
week.
next.
Sorry?
Everybody's off next.
Well, I'm off the week after next, sorry. Yes. I'm going to be in Vegas suffering at AWS reInvent. I'm like a kid in a candy store looking at all the presentations. It's like, oh, I want to go there.
I need to get you to help me start up an EC2 instance.
Yes.
I was having issues the other day. Like I got everything started up. Well, I'll talk to you.
Yeah. By the way, if you haven't done so, right? Again, it's not an ad. I feel terrible, right? Because now I'm working for an Amazon subsidiary, so it looks like an ad. But play with all three of the big ones, right? AWS is definitely the biggest one. Azure is second, and it's really good too. I haven't really played with Google's Cloud Engine, but it's kind of the third one, right? All three of them give you free stuff to play, right? So play with that stuff. It's gonna make it's gonna be super valuable for you to play with that stuff. It's maybe a good thing to do over the break. Maybe you have 700 other things that are good to do over the break. I don't know, but at some point in life, play with those things.
You say AWS and what's the other one?
AWS is Amazon Web Services. God, this is ugly.
Big pictures.
No, I made my text huge because I like to read. I like to be able to see that stuff, and I'm half blind because I'm 45 and half blind before that anyway. But I have a console. Let me show you AWS. The other one is Azure. I probably have an account at some point in time, but now I don't like them. No, I was very grateful to Microsoft. They all of their employees get MSDN Pro, which gives you like $100 a month or something like that on Azure, which allows you to do all sorts of cool stuff. But they kept me on that thing for like 2 years. I'm assuming they don't even notice. Um, but now I don't have the free Azure thing, so I don't like them anymore. I tried not to use it because I knew that it wasn't supposed to, but now I don't. Now I don't have it. Azure has, I think, a much sleeker interface. AWS has kind of a more bare bones interface, and you don't. You can use both of them to play, but you really shouldn't. What you do is use CloudFormation, or in Amazon's case, to create whichever resources you want. So this is a CloudFormation template for creating an S3 bucket. I'm assuming all three of them. I really know AWS now decently. I have a fairly decent clue about Azure, and I know that Google Cloud Engine exists. I haven't never used it. For all of them, they give you a few services. God. You normally want compute. So they give you EC2 is Amazon's thing. It allows you to create virtual machines on the cloud. This is actually incredibly cool. I tend to do everything with CloudFormation because that makes it super easy to undo it, and then I don't get charged actual money. But let me do it on this. I'm gonna use Amazon Linux AMI. I'm gonna use I'm still in the free tier, I guess. So I can launch this machine. I'm gonna create a new key pair because I don't remember where's the other one. And this is launching a server somewhere. I have no clue where, but I don't terribly care because I'm just gonna remote into it. While this is creating, let me show you the other two big things. S3 gives you unlimited-ish storage. And the really cool thing about this stuff is that you pay by the minute, right? So for S3, the pricing is nothing until you start to get used to the fact that it's nothing and you start using a lot of it, right? But it gives you
And why is it called S3?
it's simple storage service, SSS. So
The EC2 is something cloud computing.
and something computing too, right? Oh yeah, something cloud computing. Yeah.
It's all this catchy names that make other people like, wait, what is that?
It is
And they
even
learn that.
after that they started like half their stuff is cloud, whatever, right? And so you get all confused like cloud watch, cloud front, cloud. It's like and all of their code deployment and stuff is code whatever. So it's like code pipeline, code deploy, code like I don't know what the heck you're talking
I
about
guess
anymore.
that's worse.
But when you have this many, right? You're doomed anyway. That's part of the problem, but it's really cool. So
Okay, well, it's not free. They charge
it's
you.
not free. There's some free usage tier, but they charge you 2 cents per gig per month. Right? It's not free. It's just cheap as hell, right? Until you decide to upload all your music collection, right? All the pictures of your kids or something like that, and now that's 50 gigs. Well, that's still a buck. But, right? When you start putting all your virtual machines or something like that in there, now it costs money, right? But it's super cheap, and you can say, you know what, I'm just gonna store this stuff, right? And it's gonna give me.
Well, that's still expensive compared to just buying your own drive. I mean,
It is expensive to buying your own drive. On the other hand, it's in the cloud. It's somebody else's problem, and it's backed up and replicated automatically, right? So yes, I mean it is, right? It is.
Well,
Mm,
forgetting about electricity costs, and I don't know,
eh,
you have to think about it.
yeah. It's not magical. It's still costing money, and they make money on that stuff, right? So on the other hand, they are super efficient compared to you. So for stuff that's in the cloud, it is. It also makes it like, oh, I can do this for $2 a gig. So as long as I'm not using more than a gig, right? I can put backups in there. I can do tons of things for really cheap. EC2 is also super cheap in the same kind of way. Um, like that instance was. Do they have the other stuff? Let's do EC2 pricing. It can be super cheap. EC2 um, costs what? On-demand pricing, which is the most expensive one. So I want it right now. Um, it's about half a cent per hour for the cheapest thing, which is about $7 a month or something like that. Now it can go to C4 8x large is a buck per hour, right? $5 an hour. Oh yeah. Yeah.
So
Now this thing has 2 terabytes of RAM, right? So if you need a machine with 2 terabytes of RAM, not quite 2
I
terabytes.
got a question right here. That hour is when you access it or the whole day?
When you start it until you end it, you decide machine start.
Okay.
Now you have it.
Then
You decide machine ends, and that's
that
when
one's down, but the rest of them.
the rest of the time it's not on. You cannot access it.
Okay.
So it's not being charged. When you want it, you say start. It starts.
Oh.
So now I have one running. I can go find its IP address. And then do -I. What did I call this thing? Test the 10. SSH is horrible. It's trying to protect me from myself. I know what the heck I'm doing.
So you can
But
pay $13,000 an hour for
30, and there
a
is
gigantic server. That's what it is.
it's a gigantic server, right? Like
No, it's just $13.
$13 an hour. It has 128 vCPUs, 128 CPUs, and almost 2 terabytes of RAM.
Couldn't you just like pay it to like launch like a DDoS attack or something? Just like buy
You wouldn't do that. You would launch a million tiny ones for a DDoS attack. But you could do stuff like this, right? To perform huge computations, right? Like I need to get everything in RAM, do stuff, and store it. I can start it, do it once a day, right? Pay $13 a day, which is still $500 a month, right? But and calculate every user, right, and do the recommendations for them or something like that, right?
You don't have to like build a whole new room.
I don't
just
have to build a
this-
room.
this
Yes.
main computer.
So let me exit and let me kill this guy before I get charged money. I'm probably.
You don't need to hire me, to take care of.
Well, yes and no. We are not disappearing. We are becoming a lot more DevOps. By the way, programming is amazing. Learn programming. Also, if you can, learn sysadmining, right? Be able to create your own Linux server, install stuff in there, right? Because that makes you independent of the dev people. Yes, it's a different mentality. A sysadmin person is gonna try to keep the server running. A developer is trying to implement new stuff, and it's perfectly okay with breaking old stuff, right? Sysadmin is supposed to keep everything running, and so you develop a different mentality. But if you can do your own stuff, that's gonna make your life so much easier. Can I kill you, guy? Terminate. Yes, terminate. Kill it. Die, die, die. I don't remember this stuff because we don't get charged real money for AWS. So we haven't really worried too much about pricing. I think AWS charges you by the hour. So even if I only used it 5 minutes, I still get charged an hour. It's 2 pennies or something like that.
In case, let's say you turn it on and forget to turn it off, did you get any notification like that?
Not unless you set it up. You get a bill of $500 at the end. So people tend to run really high bills. Not AWS, Amazon in general was famous for its customer service until we got used to even better customer service, right? So they tend to be, in general, fairly lenient with that stuff. Like if you call and say, you know what, I messed up. I left this guy running, right? So it's $13 an hour. I left it running for like 3 days, right? They can go look and like, yeah, you weren't logged on, right? So for this time only, I'm gonna let it go, or I'm gonna charge you half, or I'm gonna charge you $10 or something like that. They tend to do that. I don't know. I've never done it. But people who have done that kind of stuff and kind of run really large bills, you can call and ask, and they might.
Yes,
Um,
it's easy to forget,
That's why I tend to never do it on the console. I always do it with CloudFormation, and then I can just say create this stack that has all these resources. When I'm done, I just say destroy this stack and destroys all the resources, and I stop paying. To me, it makes a lot more sense to do it that way. Takes a little bit more effort, but then I know exactly what I'm doing, and that's what we do at work.
Yeah, well, that's much easier than the process, even from Windows going in, try to SSH in, especially to a Linux machine.
Oh yeah. It's not Git Bash gives you SSH. You now can SSH. Life is good. You already
Well,
have it.
it also had an issue with with the key. It had to change it to.
I had to change the permissions because SSH doesn't like a key that is writable.
PEM that wanted a different file.
No, it wanted the same file. It just wanted something else. But wanted to change the permissions. It was telling me that other people could write to it so they could mess up my key and didn't like it. Or other people could read it or something like that. So it told me, no, you
I
can't.
had to change it to this PPK.
Oh.
I had to use this PuTTY.
Oh, you're using PuTTY.
Well, I was just.
We can play.
Figure it all out.
But when you have a chance, play with this stuff, right? And if you have a chance, don't just play with AWS, which is amazing. Also play with Azure, which is also amazing, and also play with all the other guys, which are also amazing. It is a really good thing to do. So we already know how to do SQL.
Yeah, we know everything about SQL.
You know everything you know about SQL, right?
Yeah. Triple queries.
Chances are that you will take databases sometime soon, right? Really learn SQL. That's half your life. I mean, you need to learn how to program. You need to learn SQL. And that makes you kind of able to start applying for jobs. Data structures will make you much better programmer unless you go take it before this one. And then SQL will give you a lot more practical stuff. So after that, you should be able to start looking for jobs and stuff like that. Any other questions? And we
So
still
for
have
like
half an hour.
This kind of implementation, like you've got to write like the SQL like just manually, like no matter how complicated. Because sometimes some programs it's like, oh okay, you could write insert into table blah blah blah, but then you're using Visual Studio or something. You're just like, oh, you just click on something.
You can do all those things, right? As a programmer, you learn to hate those things. You could use those things to generate code and then use the code. But if not, I mean, you tend to use, like, you have an IDE so that when you start typing the field name, it will do it automatically for you and things like that. But you don't want to click because then you don't know what happened. Those tend to be easy to use, but really hard to debug. But different people. Different things for different people. Isn't this cool? Other cool stuff we can do. Shall we try to do MVC? Yeah. This is dead, right? Life is good. Normally, you access stuff through servers, right? So you want something that will allow you to listen to requests and respond to them. Arguably, the easiest thing with Java is to use Spring Boot. Spring is one of the competing technologies. Spring Boot is supposed to make it easy. So we can do this. Let's see if we can manage to do that in have Maven Central, right? Yeah. Let's see if we can do. Can do a 5-minute intro to Spring Boot MVC. Ah. Oh, because I need to do this. Cool. Next class we will do. Well, let me do this. Cancel. I'm gonna create a new package and call it Spring Boot. Now inside there, I can create a class.
What are you doing with Spring Boot?
Magic that will do a server. And we'll I need to do the flash glue idea. To give me this stuff. And maybe this will work. No. Maybe. The idea is to allow for things to be called over the network, right? So what I'm doing is specifying, and we use annotation. This is a REST controller, so this is something callable over the network. This says they're gonna call it with this path, right? /greeting. It's gonna have a parameter in the request, which is gonna be called name in the request, and I'm also gonna call it name here. God, it's not running. So if you would call /greeting right, or request param. What did they do to this guy to make it work? Magic is not working. I am missing one piece of magic. Ah. And I'm not doing the right magic, which is horrible. It is not realizing that it's a Spring Boot app. Because I have this. I can do com.okaram.springboot.application. See if this will make it run. Ah. Mm-hmm. Oh, it's not inside com.okaram, it's just inside Spring Boot. Can I move it? Move package. Now it is in the right place. Still doesn't work. Never mind. Then I'm gonna change it the other way. This hopefully would allow us to run server. Yeah, it is doing magical stuff. There is an obscene amount of magic that Spring Boot does, but it told me that it started on the 8080 port. So that means that I can come, actually I can go to localhost colon 8080 and that will show me stuff because Spring Boot shows stuff by default or not. Does this make sense? Isn't this cool? And it is done by importing the Spring Boot magic, which imports tons of magic. But then after you do that, all I really need to do is do something like this, right? I have request mapping. This is the part of the path, and then this is my parameter. That's it. I just returned something, and this is being explicitly returned. This is what I'm returning. Isn't this cool? If you think about it, if you combine logic, which you have learned in this class, right, with this magic and database magic, now you're dangerous. Now you can do applications that actually do stuff. But isn't this cool? Maybe. Any questions? Any answers? No. I am horribly behind in grading. Hopefully most of you are done with assignment 10, but I have normally been lenient with deadlines, so I will keep being lenient with deadlines. Right after this, I'm gonna go try to grade some of those pull requests and give you feedback and stuff. But don't take it as the deadline is now after Thanksgiving, but I will be allowing you to, if you're behind on assignments or something like that, do it until after Thanksgiving. But if you start thinking of it as the deadline is after Thanksgiving, right, then